Parents made my life hell and stole the company I built. You're just a worthless nobody who doesn't deserve any inheritance. Now they want my help after losing $5 million and facing bankruptcy. Thank you for being here with me today. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. I'd love it if you could share in the comments which city or country you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, let's begin our story together. The scent of antiseptic hung heavy in the air, a sterile shroud over the raw, searing pain that consumed me. Every breath was a shallow prayer, each beat of my heart a painful throb echoing the rhythm of the monitors beside my bed. One moment, I was shouting instructions on a construction site, the hum of heavy machinery a familiar symphony. The next, the world spun into a chaotic blur of metal, dust, and an unbearable snap in my right leg. They told me later it was a scaffolding collapse, a freak accident. But lying there, hooked up to tubes and machines, it felt like the world had simply decided to swallow me whole. My name is David. For nearly 2 decades, I'd poured my life into building Integrity Builders, my construction company. It wasn't just a business. It was my legacy, forged from sweat, calloused hands, and a relentless belief in doing things the right way. My values were simple: hard work, honesty, and an unwavering, almost naive, trust in family. I'd started from the ground up, took risks, pulled all-nighters, all while my daughter, Sarah, grew up around the faint scent of sawdust and the distant rumble of machinery. She was my anchor, her bright, inquisitive eyes and infectious laughter the only melody that could drown out the constant hum of worry in my head. My parents, Martha and Richard, were pillars of our community, or so it seemed. They attended church every Sunday, hosted lavish holiday dinners, and always spoke of family values with a practiced reverence. My younger brother, Mark, was their golden child. He had that easy charm, the kind that smooth-talked his way out of trouble, unlike my calloused hands that built everything from the ground up. Mark, 5 years my junior, never quite found his footing. He dabbled in various ventures, none of which truly took off, always needing a loan or investment from the family, which invariably meant from me. I always dismissed his thinly veiled jealousy, his casual dismissiveness of my hard work, as just a brotherly quirk. After all, blood was thicker than any lie, wasn't it? That was my fatal flaw. I always gave them the benefit of the doubt, believing in a bond that, as I would soon discover, was as fragile as glass. The hospital room felt stark, the fluorescent lights unforgiving. Sarah's panicked, tear-stained face was the last clear image I had before the anesthesia pulled me under. Her tiny hand squeezing mine, her eyes wide with a fear I couldn't comfort. That image burned deeper than any fractured bone. She was my priority, my everything. I clung to the thought of her, a tiny beacon in the swirling fog of pain and confusion. Days later, when the worst of the fog had lifted, they came. Mark walked in first, his gaze sweeping the room with an almost clinical detachment. He was followed by Martha and Richard, their faces etched with what I initially mistook for concern. Martha, always dramatic, dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Richard, ever the stoic, stood by the door, his arms crossed. "David," Mark began, his voice surprisingly calm, almost devoid of sympathy. "We've been talking about the business." My stomach clenched. "Don't worry," I managed, my voice raspy. "I'll be back on my feet in no time. Just need a few weeks." Mark's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smirk. "They'll be fine without you. The business is better off in my hands." The words hit me like a physical blow, colder than the sterile air in the room. They weren't just words. They were a dismissal, an ice-cold declaration of intent. He said they, like Integrity Builders, was a separate entity, not something I had poured my soul into. Martha stepped forward, her voice a practiced lament. "Oh, David, darling, it's just so sudden. But Mark is right. He's already taken over. And your father and I, well, we have our trip to Hawaii, booked months ago. Can't let this ruin our vacation, can we?" Her concern felt hollow like a stage performance. Richard simply grunted in agreement, his gaze fixed on the hospital wall, avoiding my eyes. My mind reeled. Hawaii? Now? While I was lying here, broken? What about Sarah? I asked, my voice cracking on her name. She's traumatized. She saw. Martha waved a dismissive hand. Oh dear, she's just a child. She'll be fine. Your Aunt Carol has agreed to take her. She's quiet, disciplined. It's for the best. We need to focus on your recovery, dear. And Mark will handle everything else. My chest tightened as if someone had wrapped barbed wire around my lungs. The sterile air suddenly felt thick, suffocating. They weren't just abandoning me. They were abandoning my daughter, the one person who mattered most. Aunt Carol? Sarah barely knew her. My voice felt trapped, choked by a grief deeper than any physical wound. I wanted to scream, to ask if this was what family meant to them, but the words wouldn't come. All I could manage was a hoarse whisper. Is this what family means to you? But they were already turning, their footsteps echoing faintly as they left, leaving me alone with the buzzing of machines and the chilling realization that my family, the people I had built my life around, had chosen a vacation over my suffering and my daughter's welfare. The scent of antiseptic faded, replaced by the bitter, metallic taste of betrayal. The hospital was a blur of painkillers and physical therapy, but the true agony lay in the growing emptiness in my gut. Weeks bled into a month, and the emotional wounds, unlike my fractured bones, showed no signs of healing. I was discharged, hobbling on crutches, my leg wrapped in a bulky brace that felt like a lead weight. My childhood home, the one I had poured hundreds of thousands into renovating, felt like a silent tomb. Mark's campaign began almost immediately. My phone buzzed with emails, each one a fresh cut. They were terse, formal, filled with corporate jargon about liquidity issues and restructuring for efficiency. My access to company accounts was frozen. My personal assets, intertwined with the business, became inaccessible. David, all funds are being diverted to address pressing operational needs. One email read, we'll revisit your personal disbursements at a later, more appropriate time. It was a polite way of saying, you get nothing. Mark had installed new locks on the office doors, changed the security codes, and even rerouted client calls to his personal line. I tried to reach out to our long-standing clients, people I had built relationships with over years, cemented by handshakes and trust. Each call was met with a practiced coolness. Oh, David, so sorry to hear about your accident. Mark told us you're taking a long leave for your health. Said you weren't quite up to par. The subtle implication of my incompetence, my instability, hung in the air like a noxious gas. One client, old Mr. Henderson, whose house I'd built from the ground up, muttered something about Mark offering a significant discount if they dealt directly with him. My stomach churned. Mark wasn't just managing. He was systematically dismantling everything I had painstakingly built, piece by piece. Thanksgiving, a holiday that had always been a joyous, boisterous affair at our home, approached. I heard whispers from mutual acquaintances about a grand gathering planned at my childhood home, the very house I was now struggling to keep afloat in the face of Mark's financial chokehold. My own home, where the scent of Martha's famous pumpkin pie usually wafted through the air, where Richard would carve the turkey with an almost ceremonial flourish. No invitation came. I watched, helpless, as photos flooded social media. Martha and Richard, beaming, looking every inch the proud patriarchs. Mark, his arm around a new, glamorous girlfriend, looked smug, a triumphant grin plastered on his face. And there, in the background of a few pictures, a small, somber figure. Sarah. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes, even in the blurry photos, looked distant, haunted, and I was conspicuously absent, literally cropped out of every picture. A family photo of them on the front porch, the autumn leaves a vibrant backdrop, but where I would have stood, there was just an empty space, digitally erased. I stared at the image on my phone, my fingers trembling so hard I dropped it onto the hardwood floor. It was like I'd never existed. Sarah's visits became rarer, supervised by Aunt Carol, a woman whose emotional range seemed limited to polite nods and terse instructions. Sarah, usually so bright and chatty, was withdrawn, quiet. She'd cling to me fiercely during our brief visits, her small body trembling, but she avoided eye contact when her aunt was present. She started having nightmares, waking up screaming about falling and Daddy being gone. My heart ached. The physical pain was nothing compared to the profound emotional toll on my daughter. Her silence was louder than any accusation, a constant reminder of their cruelty and my helplessness. My parents returned from Hawaii, sun-kissed and relaxed, offering shallow apologies that felt more like empty platitudes. "Oh, David, we were so worried about you, darling." Martha's voice dripped with saccharine concern. "But, sometimes you just need to step away from things. You're just imagining things, David. Mark is doing his best. He's taking such initiative, really stepping up. You need to focus on getting better, not stirring up trouble." Her signature move, the concerned sigh, followed by a dismissive wave of her hand, made my blood boil. Richard, true to form, just grunted, then changed the subject to their amazing trip, recounting details of snorkeling and luau feasts while I sat there, trying to process how they could be so utterly oblivious. Every conversation was a twisted maze designed to make me doubt my own sanity. Was I really the problem? Was I overreacting? Their gaslighting was insidious, a slow poison leaching into my confidence. "He's your brother, David. He only wants what's best for the family." Martha would insist, emphasizing family as if it were a sacred word. Yet their actions screamed the opposite. I felt like I was drowning, pulled under by the very people who were supposed to keep me afloat. The ultimate betrayal arrived one blustery December morning. A certified letter. The weight of the envelope in my hand felt ominous, like holding a death warrant. It was a formal eviction notice. From Family Trust Holdings, managed by Mark. It stated that my childhood home, the one I had meticulously renovated over the years, pouring hundreds of thousands of my own money, sweat, and weekends into its restoration, was being sold to cover business debts. Debts David knew nothing about. Debts that suspiciously seemed to have materialized out of thin air since Mark took over. I had 30 days to vacate. I read the words again, and again, the neatly typed sentences blurring before my eyes. The house I'd grown up in, the house where I dreamed of raising Sarah, suddenly felt foreign, every family photo on the wall like an accusation. It wasn't just a house. It was the last tangible link to a past I thought was real, and now even that was being ripped away. I stumbled into the living room, feeling a profound wave of nausea. I stared at the packed boxes, feeling completely defeated, utterly alone. This was it, my rock bottom, my daughter's small hand, finding mine in the quiet despair of the moment, was the only thing grounding me in that moment of utter hopelessness. For her sake, I knew I had to fight. The eviction notice was a punch to the gut, but it also lit a fuse. Lying there, helpless, had been one thing. Losing Sarah's home, watching her withdraw into herself, that was another. A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest, displacing the despair. I wasn't David, the trusting, naive brother anymore. I was a father fighting for his daughter, a man about to reclaim what was rightfully his. Just when I felt completely lost, a lifeline appeared from an unexpected quarter. My Uncle Frank. He was Martha's older brother, a shrewd, retired businessman who had always kept a quiet, almost observational distance from our family's often dramatic dynamics. He was known for his sharp mind and his no-nonsense attitude, but he rarely interfered. He called me, his voice gruff but laced with genuine concern. "David, I've been hearing things, and seeing things. Mark's been throwing money around like a drunken sailor, and your parents just bought that absurd new summer house in the Hamptons. Something's not right with your family, especially Mark. He's been bragging about taking over at the golf club." Uncle Frank's words were a cold splash of water, jarring me awake. He hinted at whispers he'd overheard about shady business dealings, about Mark's erratic decisions since I'd been sidelined. His call gave me the first glimmer of hope, and more importantly, a name, Ms. Ramirez. "She's a bulldog, David," Frank had said. "Specializes in family disputes. The uglier the better. Doesn't take any nonsense. especially from those who exploit others. Ms. Elena Ramirez was every bit the bulldog Uncle Frank promised. She had a sharp, intelligent gaze that could cut through concrete, and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. Her office, unlike my family's polished veneers, felt real, filled with stacks of legal briefs and the scent of strong coffee. "So, Mr. Miller," she began, her voice calm but firm, "tell me everything. No detail is too small." She started digging, meticulously poring over the legal structure of Integrity Builders, the family trust documents, anything that might shed light on Mark's sudden control and my parents' complicity. Her questions were precise, her logic unwavering. I recounted every detail. The hospital visit, Mark's sneering words, the Hawaii trip, Sarah's withdrawn silence, the social media photos, the eviction notice. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of paperwork, phone calls, and hushed meetings. Then, one Tuesday morning, Ms. Ramirez called me into her office. Her face was unusually somber. "David," she said, her voice low, "we've found something big." Ms. Ramirez laid out a stack of documents. "Your grandfather, the original founder of Integrity Builders," she began, "was a very shrewd man, and he was deeply devoted to you, David. He saw your potential, your dedication. Shortly before his passing, he created a revised will." My breath hitched. "This will," she continued, pushing a crisp, official-looking document across the table, "left the majority ownership of Integrity Builders and substantial trust funds directly to you, David, recognizing your unwavering commitment and vision for the company." My mind reeled. I had always believed Grandpa had left the business to the family trust, to be managed jointly. But why didn't I know? "Because," Ms. Ramirez explained, her eyes fixed on mine, "this will was never probated. It was deliberately suppressed. Your grandfather, being the cautious man he was, had a trusted, longtime family lawyer, a man named George Ellison, hold onto a sealed copy, with instructions to only reveal it if he ever felt you were unfairly treated, or if the family's values were truly compromised." She explained how they had tracked down Mr. Ellison, now retired and living quietly in Florida. He had been hesitant at first, bound by old loyalties. But when Ms. Ramirez laid out the pattern of betrayal and Mark's actions, his sense of justice had prevailed. He had provided the original, sealed copy of the true will, along with his own sworn affidavit. "Your parents and Mark knew about this, David," Ms. Ramirez said, her voice devoid of judgment, just stating facts. "They presented an earlier, less favorable will, or more likely, they manipulated the legal paperwork immediately after your grandfather's death, using a combination of the trust's loopholes and their positions as executors to divert your rightful inheritance to themselves, and then systematically to Mark after your accident. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a carefully orchestrated heist, years in the making. They used your naive trust, your dedication to the business, and your busy schedule as a cover." The paper felt cold in my hands, but the truth it held set my blood boiling. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a surgical dissection of my trust, a calculated plot by the very people I had loved and believed in. The smell of old paper and ink suddenly filled the room, solid, undeniable proof of their deceit. "This will is powerful," Ms. Ramirez said, "but we need to make sure they can't squirm out of it. We need to expose their true nature. We need them to confess, or at least show their hand." Her plan was audacious. She suggested a formal mediation, ostensibly to discuss terms for the business, knowing Mark and my parents, blinded by their greed and arrogance, would walk in confidently, their social masks firmly in place. But first, a final piece of undeniable evidence. "Uncle Frank," Ms. Ramirez continued, "has been instrumental. He's been keeping his ears open, and he's willing to help us get a recording. My uncle, ever discreet, had arranged a casual family dinner with Mark and my parents, ostensibly to discuss future business strategies and David's prolonged recovery. He discreetly recorded the entire conversation. The audio file Ms. Ramirez played for me was chilling. Mark's voice, usually so smooth, was thick with malice and alcohol, openly gloating about how he outsmarted me. He always thought he was so damn smart, building that business, Mark sneered. But it was my birthright. Dad and Mom always knew I was the favorite. David was just a workhorse, a means to an end. He even bragged about fabricating some of the business debts to ensure my eviction. And then, the sickening part. My mother's low, knowing laugh in the background, followed by Richard's dismissive grunt. It wasn't just an acknowledgement. It was an affirmation of their complicity. There was no remorse, only a triumphant smugness. It wasn't just a knife in the back, I thought, my knuckles white as I gripped the armrest. It was a surgical dissection of my trust, my entire life. The mediation room was sterile, impersonal. Martha, Richard, and Mark walked in, their faces composed, radiating an air of polite confidence. Martha wore a silk scarf, Richard a crisp suit, Mark a designer watch. They looked like the perfect American family. They offered me perfunctory nods, their eyes holding a practiced pity. They sat opposite us, a polished table between us, a battleground in miniature. Ms. Ramirez started with pleasantries, then got straight to the point. She laid out the financial discrepancies, the evidence of asset stripping. Mark shifted, uncomfortable. Martha's hand fluttered to her chest. Then, Ms. Ramirez slid the original sealed will across the table to the mediator. Mr. Miller's grandfather's true last will and testament, Your Honor. The mediator's eyes widened as she scanned the document. Mark's face drained of color, his smug grin melting into a sickly pallor. Martha gasped, then burst into theatrical tears, a well-rehearsed performance designed to elicit sympathy. Oh, David, how could you? After all we've done for you. Richard sat in stunned silence, his stoic facade cracking, revealing the fear beneath. Then Ms. Ramirez pressed play on a small recorder. Mark's voice, clear as a bell, filled the silent room. He always thought he was better, David. This business was my birthright, not yours. You were just a means to an end. The chilling laughter of my mother, the low grunts of my father, their complicity, undeniable, raw, and exposed. The room exploded. Mark lunged forward, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. You little sneak! You snake! Martha wailed. This is a betrayal. A family betrayal. I rose slowly, leaning on my cane, my gaze unwavering as I met each of their eyes. My voice, usually soft-spoken, was steady, strong, amplified by the silent rage that had fueled me for weeks. For years, I believed in family above all else. I poured my soul into integrity builders. I built something for us, but you didn't see a son or a brother. You saw a tool. You saw a mark. You saw someone to exploit, someone to discard when you were done. I pointed my cane at Mark. You're a con artist, Mark. And you? I turned to my parents, my voice laced with a cold sadness. You are complicit. The worst part? You abandoned my daughter, traumatized her, while you were busy counting your ill-gotten gains. You are not family. Their masks were off. Mark, red-faced and sputtering. Martha, dissolving into desperate, ugly sobs that held no trace of genuine emotion. Richard, speechless, his eyes wide with a newfound fear. The mediator looked on, appalled. The scene was chaotic, raw, and utterly satisfying. It was a messy, painful truth, but it was my truth. I had chosen to expose it, and in doing so, I felt a powerful, liberating surge of justice. The air in the mediation room, after the storm had passed, settled into a heavy, silent calm. Mark, dragged out by his own lawyer, was still sputtering threats. Martha's sobs had devolved into choked gasps, her carefully constructed image shattered. Richard sat slumped, the life drained from his face. The moment of justice had been brutal, messy, and far from the clean, dramatic justice of a movie. But it was real and it was mine. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. With the undeniable proof of my grandfather's true will and Mark's recorded confession, Ms. Ramirez had an airtight case. Mark faced criminal charges for corporate fraud and embezzlement. The financial records he tried to manipulate, the assets he tried to divert to shell corporations, it all came crashing down on him. The legal repercussions were severe, ensuring his golden boy image was not just shattered, but publicly disgraced. Martha and Richard, implicated in the fraudulent transfer of the business, faced significant civil penalties. The newly acquired summer house, the expensive new car, the lavish vacations, all were scrutinized, revealed as funded by my stolen inheritance. Their carefully cultivated social standing, their veneer of respected community pillars, crumbled like dry earth. News of the lawsuit, the shocking details of the family's betrayal, spread like wildfire through our close-knit community. There were whispers at the grocery store, averted gazes at church. Friends, acquaintances, even distant relatives, those who had always suspected something was off about my family's perfect facade, now offered quiet nods of understanding, even apologies. David, old Mrs. Gable, a neighbor who'd known me since childhood, squeezed my hand one day. "I always wondered about your mother. Too sweet to be true." There was a subtle sense of collective, "I told you so," a quiet vindication that resonated deeply. Reclaiming Integrity Builders was a monumental task. Mark's mismanagement had left a trail of chaos, neglected projects, and disgruntled clients. But I had the loyalty of my most trusted employees, those who had seen through Mark's charade. And I had Uncle Frank. He became not just an ally, but a true mentor, offering shrewd advice and unwavering support. We worked tirelessly, rebuilding client trust, stabilizing finances, one brick at a time. The physical pain in my leg gradually receded, replaced by the satisfying ache of hard work, a familiar comfort. The company began to thrive again, stronger, healthier, built on a foundation of true integrity, not false promises. But the most important rebuilding was of my life with Sarah. She was my constant focus, my driving force. I spent every spare moment with her, reading stories, building Lego castles, simply being present. We sought professional help for her trauma, gently unraveling the fear and confusion she'd experienced. Slowly, painstakingly, her laughter returned. It was a quiet, hesitant sound at first, then blooming into the bright, uninhibited joy I remembered. Sarah's laughter slowly returned, a sweet melody after months of painful silence. I remember thinking, watching her chase butterflies in the backyard. It was the sound of a true family, built on love and trust, not blood. I embraced my newfound independence, the lessons learned about trust and boundaries etched deeply into my soul. I stopped trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. I redefined family. It wasn't about shared DNA. It was about shared values, mutual respect, unwavering support. Uncle Frank became a true surrogate father figure, a constant presence, offering wisdom and genuine affection. My friendships deepened, built on a foundation of honesty and shared experience. I learned to choose my family, not just accept the one I was born into. 3 weeks after the mediation, after the legal proceedings had officially concluded and the financial consequences for Martha and Richard were becoming painfully real, my phone rang. It was Martha. Her voice was thin, reedy, stripped of its usual practiced sweetness. Richard was on speaker, his usual booming voice reduced to a barely audible whisper. They were facing financial ruin. Their Hamptons house was being foreclosed. Their social circle had abandoned them. Mark was facing serious prison time. They were begging for my forgiveness, for family to be family again. Their plea wasn't for reconciliation, not really. It was a desperate plea for a lifeline, a desperate hope that I would bail them out, rescue them from the consequences of their own actions. I listened, calm, composed. There was no anger, no bitterness, only a profound sense of peace. The pain of the past was still there, a faint scar, but it no longer consumed me. "Mother," I said, my voice steady, "I hope you find peace. I truly do. But my family now is Sarah, and the people who stood by me when I had nothing. I wish you well, but I am no longer your solution." There was a stunned silence on the other end, then a strangled sob from Martha. I hung up. The phone call felt hollow. There was no apology in their voices, only desperation. I listened, and for the first time felt truly free. My journey taught me that sometimes the hardest boundaries are the ones we draw with family. The cost was immense, the emotional toll immeasurable, but the price of my freedom, of Sarah's peace, was worth every single battle scar. Integrity builders thrived, built on the solid ground of my values. Sarah blossomed, a testament to resilience and the power of unwavering love. We were strong, resilient, and truly, finally, happy. Have you ever had to choose yourself or your peace over toxic family ties? Share your experience in the comments below. Let's talk about what true family really means.